Welcome, everybody. This is Avoiding the Addiction Affliction, brought to you by Westwards Consulting and the Kenosha County Substance Abuse Coalition. I'm Mike McGowan. Every man listening to us right now heard the following while growing up: suck it up, deal with it. And my personal favorite, just rub some dirt on it. In other words, keep your feelings to yourself. Our guest today, Ryan Kopyar, has written a terrific book that addresses those messages from both a personal and a professional perspective. Ryan is a licensed mental health counselor associate in Washington, a professional counselor associate in Oregon, and a registered clinical counselor in British Columbia. He has a diverse background in holistic healing, counseling, and hypnotherapy. He has authored multiple books, including Unlock the Power of Your Mind, and the book we're going to chat a lot about today, Big Boys Do Cry: A Man's Guide to Navigating Emotions and Showing Up More Vulnerable in Relationships. It is a pleasure to have this conversation today. Welcome, Ryan.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. I love your energy, man, and I'm looking forward to kicking things around with you today.
Well, when I saw your book, I just started laughing because of all those messages I heard growing up. So let's just get to it. Why is it important for men to cry?
It's important for men to cry because, we spend a lot of our life kind of hardwired in the left side of our brain, that logical side of our brain. And that's great. That allows us to be doers and problem solvers and fixers. But it doesn't do such a great job of allowing us to connect in with people, to get in touch with our emotions. And when we're in touch with our emotions, we're able to facilitate deeper levels of connection with people. And through that deeper level of connection come deeper levels of love. And so that's why it's so important for men to cry so that they can get out of their left brain into their right brain, drop down into their heart, and create deeper levels of connection with those they love.
Not so easy to do. You talk in your book about and I love this part. You talk about your great grandpa, your grandpa,
Yes.
and your dad, and their ability or inability to show emotion. I think for a lot of men, those stories ring very true. Why do you think so many previous generations of men have had difficulty showing emotion?
I think it was the way that they were raised. I think it's generational. I think in Western culture, men were told, you've got to be hard, you've got to be stoic, you've got to be tough. And let's call it what it is. My great grandfather was a hardworking oil driller. He was just a blue collar guy. My grandfather was raised mostly by his grandparents, not even my great grandfather, his father, and he lied, and I write about this in the book. He lied about his age to join the Navy. So probably not such a good he probably wasn't getting loved and hugged and told that everything was gonna be okay, art. Probably not happening if he lied to get into the Navy in the middle of wartime, nonetheless, okay? So it's generational. If I say to people, I grew up in a small town in Binghamton, New York. If I did not grow up in a Spanish speaking household, would I ever be expected to learn how to speak Spanish? No. So if men grow up and they weren't taught how to be vulnerable, how to show emotions, that means they likely are not going to be able to teach it to their kids and so down the line. So I think that's the main reason why, Mike.
Well, and to illustrate your point, I always ask my kids at Christmas, and this has now become a family joke. Just before we open presents, I look at my kids and say, "Is this going to make me cry?" And of course, inevitably, one of them gives me something that does, and that's the joke because I do cry. But I thought your story about the sign your dad gave your grandfather at Christmas was just so good. Tell that if you don't mind.
Sure. So I'm home from college and I'm small family and it's my grandfather, my grandmother and father had gotten into a disagreement. So my grandmother didn't come over. This was Christmas Eve. She didn't come over. She ended up coming over for Christmas Day. So it's my grandfather, my father, my stepmom, and myself. And we're sitting around and we were exchanging some gifts on Christmas Eve. And prior to the exchanging of gifts, my dad had mentioned, "Oh, I got a sign from our company, Kopyar oil well drilling business." And I didn't even really know too much about the fact that my family had an oil drilling business, well drilling business. But I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Whatever. He found an old sign from a local yard sale or whatever. And so I'm not really thinking too much of it. My grandfather, you get him some pragmatic gifts, you can get him the same gifts every year. He's gonna be happy, right? You know, Obsession cologne was like his, we just knew every year, all right, got to get Gramps his cologne, right? So, and maybe a half a step back, I never saw my grandfather cry. My papa on my mom's side, yes, I saw him cry quite frequently. My grandfather, never saw him cry. So we're sitting down, and my dad goes, we exchanged all of the gifts. And then my dad goes into the spare bedroom. He gets the sign. And I'm not really thinking much of it. But my grandfather starts to unwrap it. And Mike, halfway through unwrapping it, he pauses. And there is just this sense in the room of like, whoa, what's going on here? Like Gramps is a little shook. That's not like him. And I start to see a little tear kind of bead up in his eye. And he's just staring at the sign. My grandfather and my papa and myself, we're never short for words. He was short for words. And I will never forget that moment. And I write in the book, I said, I don't know what was going through him
Mhm.
emotionally. Was it kind of the processing of his childhood trauma? Was it the fact that he never wanted to take over that oil drilling business and he struggled, financially as a blue collar construction worker? Was it the fact that my dad had gone out of the way to give him such a heartfelt present of something that I literally didn't even know existed? Like the sign was so old it had 6 digits on the phone number.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's how you know it was an old sign, right? And so I'll never forget that moment and the impact that it had, because that was the first and only time I saw my grandfather cry.
And that was just a little tear that came down.
Just a little tear. Yeah.
That's just so typical. I love what you just said. I don't know what they were feeling, and it could have been just, this incredible, "Oh my gosh, your dad was so connected that he thought enough about your grandpa to buy him something that
Yeah.
represented the family, and your grandpa knew
Yeah.
that the family would go on." The other one you tell in the book that I think illustrates this a great deal is at your grandpa's funeral, where you and your dad, was it by yourselves you went over there? Uh,
Are you referring to when my grandfather had passed away?
yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So my grandfather's health was not doing well, and we're at my house having breakfast, my dad, my stepmom, and I, and we get a call from my grandmother, and she says, Art's not doing good. He's just sitting on the couch. And thinking like that's a little odd, but she called, so we should go over there. So we go over there, and I don't know if he had passed away when my grandmother had called and she was just in a state of shock or what. But we go over there, and there's no ambulance there at this point. And my grandfather is there sitting on the couch, slumped over. And we knew that he had passed at that point. And he had this favorite rocking chair. So I go and sit in the chair, and then he's on the couch across the room from the chair, and I see my dad. Very interesting. My dad sits on the other end of the couch. He didn't sit directly next to him. And we, okay, Gramps has died. He's passed on. My father, I'd seen him cry maybe 1 or 2 times in my life, but I had never heard him or seen him weep in this way. And just to give some context to the listeners and to the viewers, my mother was 8 months pregnant at the time when she was raped and killed.
Mm.
Okay. So my dad has experienced pain in his life. My dad and I have experienced tremendous loss. So to say that I had never seen my dad cry, or, cry only 1 or 2 times, I never saw my dad cry about my mom, ever, ever in my life. So I have a scene of my dad, and he's on the couch, and he just starts sobbing. He starts talking to him. You can't be gone. I love you. we got to go to OTB. My dad and my grandpa loved to go to OTB. They loved to bet horses. And he was like, we got to go to OTB. Just saying all of these things that I guess he wished he had an opportunity to say to him. And my dad sat there just weeping. And I remember sitting on the recliner, just just staring. I don't Mike, I can't even tell you what emotions I was experiencing at that time, but just staring at my dad, watching him weep and speak to my grandfather. It was one of the most profound and powerful moments of my life.
The reason I liked it so much was I've experienced the same thing with numerous friends who can't express what they're feeling towards their dads until the funeral of their dads.
Yeah.
So, not unusual at all. Do you think you just told a story and I'm so sorry what happened to your mom, the tragic story of your mom and your unborn sister. Do you think that all those stoic car rides you had with him, was that just the Hoover Dam? I can't let it out. I gotta take care of the family. Like, w was it, "If I let it out, man, we're gonna flood the valley," or what?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that question, Mike. I know that us Kopyar men are incredibly resilient and at times to a fault. And that's another thing. By getting in touch with my emotions, I've learned, hey, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to cry. It's okay to say, I don't got this. It's okay to say, I'm not the tough guy today. I just can't be that tough guy. And that's okay. And the people that are around us, they actually want to hear us say that because it allows them to be there to support us. But anyways, I don't know what was going through my dad's heart and mind, but I'm incredibly grateful to him that he continued to work 10, 11, 12 hours a day as an assistant store manager at a local supermarket and to continue to provide for me and to support me. I also know that many of those dark nights, those very limited conversation dinner table moments where it was just my dad and I, like it was sitting in that pain that has equipped me to help people as a mental health professional
Mhm.
today because I can sit with them in their pain
Mm.
and I'm not afraid of it. I'll sit there with them as long as we need to sit there in it with them. And I think that that helps the people to say, okay, I'm not in this alone and I have somebody else. And if Ryan's not afraid of this pain, maybe I can stay in it long enough so that I don't have to be afraid of it and I can work through it to process it.
Wow, that's a great point. Do you think that this is what leads some people to turn towards substances?
It's what turned me to lead towards substances. Absolutely. Yeah. I struggled with drugs and alcohol for a period of time in my life. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was all of the pain from the death of my mother and unborn sister. It was the pain of, hey, my mom is not here to give me a hug. And I really could just use a loving hug from the woman that brought me into this world. I didn't realize it, but I was using drugs and alcohol to numb that pain.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until a series of rock bottom moments for me that led me to, okay, I got to start this counseling journey. I got to start this healing journey because the drugs and the alcohol are not doing it, number one. And I'm a man of faith. And so this was not who God created me to be.
Yeah. D How do we so what do we do? I mean, as guys and women too, but how do we get over the programming that we grew up with? How do you have to sometimes I think people think psychotherapy is as soon as I figure this out, I'll be better, and my vision is that we'll wait 80 years and then in our last breaths, we'll go, "Oh, now I get it." Do we have do we have to figure it out before we move forward?
Well, it took me 30 years of not figuring it out, and my life changed pretty dramatically after I started to figure it out through my own counseling and my own healing journey. So I think that that's absolutely vital and it's absolutely a part of the journey. I think to your point about psychotherapy, counseling, whatever we want to call it, I really reflect on it as a healing journey.
Mhm.
And of course, one of the best people to do that with is a counselor. Of course, people could look and say, Ryan and Mike, you guys are biased. You work in the field. It doesn't necessarily have to be a counselor, although I think that that's a great person for it to be. It's funny. I was at the gym the other day and some guy came up to me and he said, you know, are you a cop? And I was like, "No, I'm a counselor." And I get that a lot, "Are you a cop? Are you a firefighter?" I was like, "No, I'm a counselor." And he just kinda, like, stopped and looked, right? And, but I've had a lot of people, firefighters, police officers, military, that, they say to me, "Man," and this is not initially, right? But after the first session or 2, like, you know, "You're not like a regular counselor. You don't seem like, you don't look like kind of fit the profile of a typical counselor." So to any of the men out there that are saying, "Well, I don't want to work with a woman, or I don't want to work with, some whatever guy," it's like, find somebody that you feel comfortable with,
Yeah.
whoever that may be, right? Whether it's a big bald guy like me, whether it's a woman, whoever it is, find somebody that you feel comfortable with, because that's an integral part of the healing journey. Because holding it, listen, there's no such thing as pushing it aside. There's only pushing it inside. And when we push it inside, it creates chaos and turmoil inside. I did it for 30 years. Take my advice. Don't do it. Get some help.
That's great advice. I just had my knee replaced, and, I have a friend of mine who's a doctor, and when I was thinking about getting replaced, I asked him for recommendations, and he said, "Well, do you want somebody who's going to be on time for your appointments, or would you like somebody who's going to listen to you?" And that was a great question. I said, "Somebody who's listening." He goes, "He'll be late." I said, "I'm alright with that." Well, because shopping is not a bad thing. I'm gonna go shopping a little bit later today with my daughter for a car. You gotta like what you're gonna sit in, and that includes a counselor's office.
Yes. I love that, Mike. Can I steal that one? I like
Well,
that.
yes, I'm ultimately stealable. But going back, it's interesting. You're preaching to the choir here, right? This is the choir talking to the choir. But and I'm nodding my head to almost everything you say. Yet, I still hear there's not a universal understanding that expressing your emotions as a male is a masculine thing to do. I still see men who express their emotions being mocked on television and also by their partners, uh, and by their friends. So, how do we address those critical relationships with people who don't seem supportive when we actually do
Mhm.
connect with what's inside of us?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. It's also a pretty deep question, and we could go down, or try and not go down a rabbit hole. I will say this: if you have a partner or a friend where, when you are vulnerable and share your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, even if they're not so glamorous, even if they're dark, even if it's some stuff maybe you're not so proud of that you're thinking or feeling, but you're a human being and you're feeling them and it's important to get it out. If you have an individual in your life that puts you down, makes you not feel supported, isn't willing to hold that space for you in that regard, it likely means one of two things. Number one, they are not comfortable to hold that space for you because it triggers something inside of them. Okay. And maybe there's some of their own healing journey to do there. Or, and I don't know if these are mutually exclusive, maybe it could be both. Or, there are some people that they like to see us when we're down. They like to
Mhm.
see us when we're weak, and it helps to give them a sense of control or power over us to put us down when we are vulnerable. And unfortunately, that happens sometimes in relationships. And so I think in either one of those situations, that's probably not an individual that you want to be spending a good deal of time with, or at the very least, you have an open conversation with them about it. Hey, I came to you the other day and I shared with you when I was not in such a good place. And I didn't feel like you were there to support me or hold the space for me the way I needed. And I would really like that out of our friendship. How could we make a change? How could things be different? Because otherwise I need to set a healthy boundary on this friendship or this relationship.
Oh, that's so good. But okay, you how many years did it take for you to get that down? Yeah, in other words, you just did something that's terrific, but that sense of communication and conflict resolution are also not skills. I mean, I grew up, in addition to the phrase I used before, my way or the highway, right? Another typical male thing to hear us say. So, conflict resolution, communication, what other skills do men need to develop in order to get down there and heal those parts of ourselves that need to be healed.
Emotional flexibility. Men, give yourself permission, men and women, but men particularly struggle with this. Give yourself permission to not be perfect and give yourself permission to not have everything figured out. Give yourself permission to say, not, I can't do it. I'm putting this in quotes for the listeners. Not that I can't do it forever, but I can't do it right now in this moment. And maybe that means I need support from somebody else. Maybe that means I can do it, just not in this moment. And I need to take a step back. I need to rest for 5 minutes, 5 hours, 24 hours, whatever the case may be, to do a little reset and recharge. That's part of emotional flexibility that I encourage men to learn. The other thing is to say, I'm sorry, I'm not perfect, and it's something that I'm working on. And I could really use your grace and compassion and support as I get through it, right? Hey, I take accountability. I yelled at you the other night, and that was not right of me to do. And I take full accountability for that. I'm working on it, and be specific about the actionable strategies and steps you're doing, right? I'm working on it with my counselor. I'm reading a book about it. And I ask for your grace and compassion as I work through it. So accountability for the learning, yet at the same time, ask for the grace and ask for the compassion. I think, men, you will be so surprised at the response from the women in your life if you say, hey, I dropped the ball. I take accountability and I'm sorry, but I'm aware of it. I'm working on it. And I ask for your grace and compassion.
Well, not just everybody in your life, right?
Sure.
You're
Sure.
including your boss and your coworkers. Think of how
Yeah.
unoften that happens in the workplace.
Yeah.
Let's give men a reason for doing this. What happens to your mental and physical health if you hold it all in?
Well, for those of us that have struggled in the past or maybe are currently struggling with substance use, that's a big one. And of course, we know the deleterious impact that that can have on the physical body. I share about it in the book. In my first counseling session with my therapist, Billy, I had my arm in the air, raised up in the air, and we went through a hypnosis kind of guided healing session. And as the pain started to release from my body, my arm started to go down, and it felt like my arm was up forever because and it was so stiff. There is so, I believe that we're a mind, body, soul complex. And if you're not spiritual, that's okay. Then a mind, body complex. And so I believe that pain, trauma, this is stored non-serving energy in the body. It's like a fire burning. We don't want to have a fire burning inside of us. That's not healthy for us. That's not good, right? So that fire kind of burning. And so if we don't release our emotions in a healthy and regulated way, if we do keep things inside, it's creating a firestorm inside of us of non-serving energy that's not going to be good for our mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual health.
Great way to put it. For those of you who are just listening, there's this, we're on YouTube too, so you can look at this. Ryan described himself a little bit before. He's a very fit individual, but I'll give you a go away here. On the back cover of your book, you put a picture of yourself like most authors do, only it's a little bit different. I assume you chose this picture on purpose.
Yes. It was my cousin actually that had suggested adding some kind of picture of me as a little boy. And what that picture represents to me is a compilation of my relationship with my dad, because that picture was taken on vacation when I was with my dad. And it also reminds me of my relationship with my papa. And my papa poured so much love and belief into me. My papa was a big dude, New York State trooper. I don't know how tall he was, 6'2", 6'3", maybe. He had a big old belly when I was born, and as I knew him all the way up until the time of his death when his health deteriorated. But he was in the army. He was a semi-pro baseball player. I mean, he was the man's man, right? Just a charisma for days. And he poured that hope and love and belief into me. And he showed me that it was okay to cry. He was just this tremendous balance between, big, strong, stoic guy and also would break down midway through a speech. And so that picture really brought back a lot of beautiful memories from my childhood. So that's why I added it in there.
That's great. Ryan, this has been terrific. The half an hour goes so darn fast. For those of you who are listening, you know that there's links to Ryan's books and his work and his website on the podcast. Hey, thanks for being with us today.
Mike,
Um,
it was such a great time to share this conversation with you, man. I love your energy. We could keep going for
I
for
know.
way the
That's part of
longest.
my thought. It's like, how can I make a part two into this as well? For those of you listening, if you can listen in next time, please do. And until next time, please stay safe. And if you want to cry, just go ahead and cry.